Story 1. I'll never forget that night. It was late September, just cold enough that your breath hung in the air like smoke. I'd been driving back from my cousin's place out near the hills, taking a back road I knew well, a narrow stretch that cut through open farmland, miles from the nearest town. No traffic, no houses, just empty fields and the sound of gravel crunching beneath my tires. The sky was clear, full of stars. I remember slowing down for a moment to take it in, how wide and still everything felt. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was a plane, a bright white light low over the field on my right. It hovered there, completely motionless. No blinking, no red wing lights, no engine sound. Just a solid, pulsing glow. I leaned forward over the wheel, squinting through the windshield. The light dimmed, then brightened again, almost like it was breathing. I pulled over onto the shoulder. The car's headlights cast long, pale beams over the dry grass, and the engine ticked quietly as it cooled. I rolled down my window and just listened. The night was dead silent. No wind, no crickets, nothing. Something about that stillness got under my skin. My chest felt tight, and I realized I'd been holding my breath. The light shifted, slowly, moving sideways, gliding without a sound across the field. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard they ached. It didn't move like anything I'd ever seen before. Too smooth, too controlled. Then it stopped again. This time, directly across from my car. For a moment, I thought maybe it was a drone. But the glow was too large, too steady, and there was no hum, no flicker from propellers. It just hung there, like it was watching me. I turned off my engine. The silence deepened, pressing against my ears until it almost rang. I could feel my pulse in my throat. My eyes strained to make out any shape behind the light, but all I could see was brightness, white, almost blue at the edges. It looked close enough that I could walk to it if I wanted to. Part of me thought I should. Another part, the louder part, said to just drive. I don't know why, but I got out anyway. The air outside was colder than before, sharp and dry. Gravel crunched beneath my boots as I stepped away from the car. The light didn't move. It just floated there above the field, completely silent. My skin prickled, the hair on my arms standing on end. I could feel something. Not warmth exactly, but a kind of vibration in the air, like static before a storm. When I took another step, the light began to dim, not fade, contract, like it was pulling in on itself. That's when I heard it. Not a sound exactly, more like a low hum that I felt in my chest rather than heard with my ears. My vision wavered at the edges, and the stars above me seemed to bend, shifting like water. I took a step back, suddenly dizzy. The hum grew stronger, pulsing through the ground beneath my feet. Then, all at once, everything went dark. My headlights, my dashboard, even the stars. Only the light in the field remained. I don't know how long I stood there, staring into that single light. It felt like time had thinned out, stretching between heartbeats. Every sound was gone, not just quiet, but erased. My own breathing sounded distant, like it didn't belong to me. Then, slowly, the light began to move again. It rose higher, almost lazily, until it hovered above the field like a second moon. The hum I'd felt in my chest faded, but something else took its place. A pressure, like the air itself was pushing down on me. My knees trembled under it. The strangest part was how peaceful it looked. Not menacing, not violent, just present. I wanted to look away, but couldn't. My body wasn't mine anymore. I stood there with my head tilted up, eyes locked on it, feeling this quiet pull in my stomach. Then a flash, not bright enough to blind me, but deep enough that it seemed to pass through my skin. Everything turned white, then colorless. For a second, I couldn't feel my body. No cold, no pain, no gravity. Just an endless, weightless space where my thoughts floated like dust. And then it all came rushing back. I was on the ground, face down in the grass. My mouth was full of dirt, and my ears rang like I'd been too close to an explosion. I tried to lift my head, but my limbs felt wrong, heavy, uncoordinated. The car's headlights were on again, cutting across the field. I don't remember turning them back on. The light was gone, completely. No trace of it in the sky, no lingering glow. Just star, distant, sharp, and too many. My hands were shaking as I pushed myself up. My watch was dead, my phone too. The engine started when I turned the key, but the radio was nothing but static. I drove. I didn't look back. I remember gripping the wheel so tightly that my palms ached, eyes fixed on the road like I could outrun what had just happened. Every shadow looked alive. Every flicker of light on the horizon made my chest tighten. When I finally reached town, everything looked normal. Street lights glowing, gas station open, a man sweeping the front of a convenience store. I parked in front of my house and just sat there, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My face looked pale, drawn, older somehow. There was a thin line of dried blood under my nose like I'd been hit. I went straight to the shower. The water felt strange against my skin, too hot, too sharp. When I looked down, I noticed faint red marks across my chest and arms, almost symmetrical. Not scratches, more like impressions, as if something smooth and cold had pressed into me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed listening to the silence, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it all. But then I saw the light again, not outside, not in the sky. It was behind my eyelids every time I blinked. It pulsed, steady and slow, like it was still there, like it was waiting. The next morning, I woke up on the floor beside my bed. I don't remember falling asleep there. My sheets were pushed aside, and my phone was lying face up a few feet away with the screen cracked down the middle. The strange thing was the time. It showed 3:17 a.m. and wouldn't change, no matter how many times I restarted it. For a moment, I thought maybe I was still dreaming. The sunlight coming through the curtains looked wrong, too pale, too still. The house felt off too, as if everything inside it had shifted slightly while I was gone. I could feel that same faint vibration in the air again, the one from the field. I went outside to get some air. The world was quiet. My car was still parked out front, streaked with a fine layer of dust, though I'd washed it just 2 days before. When I opened the door, the smell hit me, metallic, like burnt wiring mixed with something sour. I found bits of dry grass on the passenger seat. I hadn't driven through grass. That detail bothered me more than it should have. Later, I tried to tell a friend about it. He laughed, said I must have been tired, maybe dozed off at the wheel and dreamed the rest. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But a few nights later, when I took off my shirt before bed, I noticed something new. Faint circles, small and perfect, along my ribs. They weren't bruises. They didn't hurt. But they glowed, only slightly, when the lights were off. I didn't tell anyone after that. Weeks passed, and I tried to move on. But every night, around the same time, 3:17, I'd wake up without reason, always facing the window, always with the same feeling in my chest, that low hum just under the skin. Sometimes I'd look out and swear I saw a shimmer in the distance, like heat rising from asphalt. Other nights I'd just lie there, trying to steady my breathing, telling myself it was nothing. But deep down, I know something changed that night. I can't explain it, and I don't think I want to anymore. Because sometimes, When the air outside is still and the stars are bright enough to see your reflection in the window, I feel that pull again, gentle but certain, like something waiting just beyond the edge of the fields. And lately, I've started seeing the light again. Not above the hills this time, but closer, much closer. It lingers behind the trees, steady and patient, like it never really left. I tell myself not to look. I tell myself to stay inside. But every night, that same thought creeps in, quiet and steady, matching the rhythm of my heart. Maybe it's not the light that's coming back. Maybe it's calling me to return. Story 2. I'll never forget that night. Now, it's been almost 6 years, and still, every time I drive past Hollow Ridge, my hands start to shake on the steering wheel. I tell myself it was just my imagination, that what I saw couldn't be real, but deep down, I know better. It happened on a Friday in late November. I had just finished a long shift at the gas station and decided to take the back road home to avoid the highway traffic. That route, Hollow Ridge Road, wasn't exactly popular. It wound through dense woods and open fields with only a few farmhouses scattered miles apart. But I'd driven it 100 times before, and that night it felt peaceful, quiet. The sky was clear, stars bright enough to see the faint outlines of the trees. I remember rolling down my window and breathing in the cold air. For a while, it was just me, the road, and the hum of my old Ford engine. Then I saw the light. At first, I thought it was a plane. It hovered low over the ridge ahead, glowing white but with a strange bluish tint. It wasn't moving fast, just floating. I slowed the car, squinting at it. The light didn't blink or drift. It just stayed there, perfectly still, silent. My first thought was that someone might have set up a drone, maybe doing night photography or something. But as I got closer, I realized this wasn't like any drone I'd ever seen. It was larger, way larger, maybe the size of a small car. And it made no sound, not even the faint buzzing you'd expect. I pulled over on the shoulder, turned off the engine, and just sat there watching it. The air felt heavier somehow, like the atmosphere itself was pressing down on me. I could hear the wind moving through the grass outside, the distant call of some night bird, but everything else felt wrong. The light pulsed faintly, like it was breathing. Then it started to move, not away, not up, but down. Slowly, silently, it descended into the field on the right side of the road. My instincts told me to drive away, but curiosity won. I grabbed my flashlight, stepped out, and closed the door quietly behind me. The ground crunched beneath my boots, and my breath clouded in front of me. From where I stood, I could see the light through the grass, still glowing, soft but steady. My heart was pounding hard enough to make my chest ache. I told myself I'd just take a quick look, maybe record something on my phone, and then leave. I crossed the ditch and moved into the field. The closer I got, the colder the air became. My breath came out in thick white bursts, and even though there was no wind, I could feel the hairs on my arms rise. The flashlight flickered once, then steadied. When I was maybe 30 feet away, I saw it clearly for the first time. It wasn't a drone. It wasn't anything human-made. It hovered just above the ground, smooth, metallic, perfectly round. The light wasn't coming from it exactly. It was more like the air around it was glowing. There were no seams, no visible openings, no sound. Just that faint, vibrating hum that I could feel more than hear deep in my bones. My stomach dropped. I wanted to back away, but something about it held me there, like I wasn't in control of my own body anymore. My hand trembled as I raised my phone, but the screen froze the moment I pointed it at the object. Then the battery icon blinked red and went dark, and that's when I noticed the field had gone completely silent. No crickets, no birds, not even the wind. It felt like the world had stopped. I tried to move, but my legs wouldn't listen. My breath quickened, my chest tightening with every inhale. The light pulsed again, slowly, rhythmically, and I swear, for a split second, I thought I saw shapes inside it. Not human shapes, but something else. Then the hum grew louder, vibrating through the ground beneath me. The light brightened until I had to shield my eyes. My body started to tingle, pins and needles from my fingertips to my skull, and right before everything went white, I thought I heard something. A voice, maybe, whispering a word I didn't understand. Then nothing. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on the ground. My clothes were damp with dew, and the grass beneath me was cold. For a few seconds, I couldn't tell where I was. The world felt distant, like I was underwater. Then I saw my car parked on the road ahead, headlights still off, door slightly open. I checked my phone. It was dead, completely unresponsive. My watch had stopped too. The time on it read 1:47 a.m. I remembered pulling over a little after 11. Somehow, nearly 3 hours were gone. The field was empty. No light, no object, no sign that anything had been there, but the air still carried that metallic taste, like blood and ozone. I pushed myself to my feet, every muscle stiff and shaky, and stumbled back toward the car. My legs didn't feel right, like they didn't belong to me. Each step sent a dull ache through my spine. I got into the driver's seat and sat there for a long time, staring at the darkness. My headlights reflected nothing but the empty road. I wanted to believe I'd fallen asleep, maybe dreamed the whole thing. But my mind kept circling back to that moment before the light swallowed me, the way it had seemed to reach into my thoughts. When I finally started the car, the engine struggled for a moment like it didn't want to turn over. The radio came on by itself, static hissing through the speakers. I tried to shut it off, but the buttons didn't respond. The sound wasn't just static. It had a rhythm, like faint breathing patterns buried beneath the noise. I pressed the power button again, harder, and it finally stopped. The drive home felt endless. The road seemed to stretch further than it should have, the turns sharper, the trees taller. I kept glancing at the mirrors, convinced I'd see something following me. A light in the sky, a figure in the road, but there was nothing. Only that heavy feeling that I wasn't alone. When I reached my house, I didn't even take off my shoes. I locked every door, pulled the curtains shut, and sat on the couch until sunrise. I didn't sleep at all. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of that white glow, shapes moving behind it, and the faint echo of that whisper that had no language. The next morning, I checked the field. I told myself I needed proof, some kind of sign that what I remembered was real. But when I got there, everything looked normal, almost too normal. The grass was flattened in a perfect circle about 30 feet wide, the edges singed black like it had been scorched. The smell of metal still lingered. I took photos with my phone, but when I looked at them later, the images were blurred, warped by streaks of light that didn't exist when I was standing there. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. That night, I found a small mark behind my ear, a thin, straight line, no redness or swelling, just a scar that hadn't been there before. When I pressed it, I felt something move beneath the skin, something small and hard like a grain of sand. I told no one. Who would believe it? For weeks after that, I couldn't sleep properly. Every time I tried, I'd wake up hours later standing somewhere else in the house. Sometimes by the window, sometimes in the backyard, always facing the sky. I'd have no memory of how I got there. Then came the sound. It started as a faint hum, barely audible, just on the edge of hearing. At first, I thought it was the refrigerator or some electrical noise in the walls, but it grew stronger every night, always around the same time. just after midnight. It wasn't coming from inside the house. It came from above. The hum was steady, low and deep enough that I could feel it through the floorboards. It wasn't loud, but it filled the space in a way that made silence impossible. Every night it grew closer, pressing down from somewhere high above the house. I tried everything, turning on the TV, playing music, even wearing earplugs. But nothing drowned it out. One night I stepped outside. The air was colder than it should have been, and the sky looked strange, too still, too quiet. Not a single star, just a faint glow behind a layer of thin clouds right over my backyard. My pulse quickened. That same metallic taste returned, sharp and electric on my tongue. I wanted to run, but part of me couldn't move. I just stood there staring upward. The light began to break through the clouds, soft, white, pulsing slowly, exactly like the one I'd seen in the field. It didn't move at first. Then it began to spread, as if it was opening. I remember whispering to myself that it wasn't real, that it couldn't be. But my skin felt hot, my head filled with pressure. And for a second I thought I heard something again, something not with my ears, but in my mind. It wasn't words this time, more like a feeling being pushed into me. Curiosity. Recognition. I stumbled back inside and locked the door, even though I knew it wouldn't make a difference. The hum was now inside the house, vibrating in the walls, in my chest. My vision blurred, and every light in the house flickered once before dying out completely. I don't know how long it lasted. When I woke up, it was morning. My front door was open, and I was lying on the living room floor. My phone was beside me, the screen lit up with a single new video file I didn't remember recording. The thumbnail was black, but the timestamp matched the night before. I watched it. The footage showed my backyard from the kitchen window. I could see myself standing outside, frozen in place, staring up at the sky. Then the light appeared. Huge, bright, impossible. It filled the entire frame, swallowing everything. Before the video cut to static, I could make out faint silhouettes descending within it. Thin, tall, shifting like smoke. I deleted the video immediately. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I was afraid of what it meant. In the weeks that followed, the hum stopped. The dreams faded. The mark behind my ear began to heal, though sometimes it burns when the sky turns cloudy. I moved out of that house, far away from Hollow Ridge. But every now and then, when I'm alone outside at night, I feel it again. That same pressure in the air, that same silent weight above me. Sometimes I look up and swear I see a faint white glow moving just behind the clouds. And every time it happens, I wonder if they ever really left, or if they're still waiting. And the worst part, the part I can't explain, is that lately, I've been waking up with dirt on my shoes, even though I don't remember going outside. Story 3. I've told this story only twice, and both times people just smiled politely, waiting for the punchline that never came. There is no joke. What I saw that night changed the way I look at the sky forever. I was driving back from my uncle's cabin in northern Idaho, and it was around midnight, maybe a little later. The road was empty, just endless pine trees on both sides and the narrow beam of my headlights cutting through the dark. The air felt heavier than usual, like the forest was holding its breath. I remember turning off the radio because I wanted to hear the night sounds, the gravel under my tires, the faint chirping of crickets. But then I realized something strange. The forest was completely silent. No insects, no wind through the trees, just silence. I slowed down, my stomach tightening for no reason I could explain. I thought maybe an animal was nearby, something big, maybe a bear. But as I rounded a curve, I saw a light through the trees. It wasn't like headlights or a campfire glow. It was bright, white, almost blue, and it didn't flicker. It just hovered there, steady, too high to be from any car and too low to be a star. I pulled over. My first thought was that someone's drone had gone off course. But when I stepped out of the car, the light didn't move or make a sound. It was about 100 feet above the treetops, completely still. The air was colder outside. I could hear my own breathing, slow and uneven. I remember my hands shaking as I pulled out my phone to record it. The camera struggled to focus. It kept flickering between black and a faint glow. Then the screen froze and turned off even though I'd just charged it. That's when the light shifted. It didn't fly away or drop, it just turned, like it was rotating to face me. I don't know how I knew, but I could feel it looking right at me. My chest felt tight. My heart started to pound so hard, I could hear it in my ears. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. It was like my body had forgotten how. The silence pressed down until it felt like my skull was ringing. Then, without warning, the light flared brighter. The trees lit up like daylight, every branch casting clear shadow across the road. And just as suddenly, it was gone. The darkness slammed back in. My vision blurred with after-images of that glow burned into my eyes. I stumbled back into the car, slammed the door shut, and locked it like that would somehow help. I sat there, breathing fast, gripping the steering wheel, trying to convince myself it had just been lightning or something. But there hadn't been any clouds. I waited a few minutes, watching the treetops in the distance. The road stayed empty. No sound, no light. Finally, I decided to drive the rest of the way home, even if it meant taking the long route. But when I turned the key, the car didn't start. All the lights on the dashboard flickered weakly, then went dark. I tried again. Nothing. The silence outside felt heavier than ever, pressing against the windows like the whole forest was listening. I could see my breath fogging up the glass. I remember glancing up one last time through the windshield, and there it was again. The light. Closer this time. It was hovering directly over the road now, maybe 50 feet above my car. The light wasn't blinding anymore, just soft and steady. Almost peaceful in a way that made it worse. I could see the outline of the trees reflected against it, bending slightly from the air pressure. I didn't hear anything mechanical. No engines, no hum, nothing that suggested movement. It was like the air itself had stopped existing. I sat frozen in the driver's seat, my fingers gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles hurt. My heart was beating so fast it felt like it might tear through my chest. Then the inside of the car began to glow. It wasn't coming from the headlights or the dashboard. It was seeping through the roof, faint but everywhere. My skin prickled with static, and my vision seemed to pulse with the light. I tried to move, to open the door, but my body wouldn't cooperate. Every muscle felt heavy and unresponsive, like I was sinking underwater. For a few moments, I just sat there, breathing unevenly, staring up through the windshield. That's when I noticed shapes, barely visible against the brightness. They weren't clear, more like silhouettes drifting inside the glow. They didn't have definite forms, just long outlines that moved slowly, deliberately. I blinked, and the light pulsed brighter for a moment, then dimmed again. When it dimmed, I could swear I saw one of those shapes outside my window. It wasn't human. It was tall, taller than any person I'd ever seen, its frame narrow and too thin to make sense. My breath caught in my throat, and I could feel the panic rising from somewhere deep in my stomach. My reflection in the window blurred, and behind it, something shifted, watching me. I don't remember opening the door, but I was suddenly outside the car. The cold hit me so sharply it hurt. The light was directly above, silent and immense, stretching wider than it had before. I tilted my head up, and for a moment everything felt completely still. There was a sensation, not physical, not like touch, but inside my mind. A pressure, a thought that wasn't mine, whispering through the space behind my eyes. I couldn't understand it, but it felt like a question. My vision dimmed around the edges. The air smelled metallic, sharp and unnatural. I remember feeling weightless, as if my body wasn't connected to the ground anymore. The trees blurred, the road disappeared, and the light seemed to fold around me. Then, nothing. No pain, no sound, no sense of time. When I came to, I was lying face down on the pavement. My mouth was dry, and my ears were ringing. The car was gone. Just gone. The road stretched empty in both directions, and the only light came from a faint line of dawn rising through the trees. I tried standing, but my legs felt weak. My clothes were damp, and my arms were covered in a thin layer of gray dust that came off when I wiped at it. I looked around, disoriented, my mind spinning in and out of focus. My phone was in my pocket, but the screen was cracked and completely dead. When I finally walked back toward the main road, I found my car parked half a mile away, engine cold, keys still in the ignition. I didn't remember moving it. That's when I saw the mark on the windshield. 3 long, faint impressions, almost like fingerprints, pressed into the glass from the outside. They glowed slightly in the early light before fading completely. I sat inside for a long time, gripping the steering wheel, waiting for my hands to stop shaking. My thoughts kept looping back to that feeling in my head, the sense that something had spoken, not in words, but in meaning, like it had seen something in me it recognized. I drove home in silence, but I never made it all the way back that day. About an hour into the drive, I started feeling strange. My vision blurred at the edges, and the road ahead seemed to shift slightly, like it was bending under heat. My chest felt tight again, and my breathing came unevenly. I thought maybe I was just exhausted, maybe in shock from whatever had happened. But when I looked at the clock on the dashboard, it didn't make sense. The last time I remembered checking the time, the sun was just coming up, around 6. The clock now said 9:42. Almost 4 hours had passed. I had no memory of them. When I finally got home, the world felt too bright, too loud. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the wall clock, it all sounded off, slightly delayed, like the sounds weren't matching what I was seeing. I took a long shower, hoping to calm down. But as the water hit my skin, I noticed small red marks along my arms and shoulders. Perfectly circular, like something had pressed into me while I was unconscious. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the light again. The perfect circle above the trees, the slow pulsing glow, the silhouettes moving inside it. I kept telling myself it was a dream or a hallucination caused by stress, but deep down I knew it wasn't. There was a weight in my chest that wouldn't leave, like a memory that hadn't finished forming. Around midnight, I felt it again, the pressure in the air. Not sound, not vibration, just a heaviness that made the hairs on my neck rise. The lamp beside my bed flickered once, then dimmed. The silence that followed wasn't normal silence. It was deep, total, like the world was holding its breath again. I sat up, afraid to look at the window, afraid to confirm what I already sensed. My heart pounded so hard it hurt, my breath short and sharp. For a few seconds, I convinced myself it was just anxiety. Then a pale glow began to spread across the wall. I didn't move. It wasn't bright enough to be a car or a streetlight. It was that same color, white with a faint blue edge, soft and alive, bending around the corners of the room. I stayed completely still, unable to breathe properly. feeling the weight of the air pressing down again. Then, just as quietly as it came, the light faded. The air seemed to release, sound returning in a slow rush. The faint hum of the fridge, the creak of the walls. I realized I was gripping the sheets so tightly that my hands hurt. I sat there until sunrise, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. The next morning, I went outside. My car was parked exactly where I'd left it. But when I walked around to the passenger side, I saw something on the paint near the door handle. 3 faint streaks, the same size and spacing as the ones that had been on the windshield. Since that night, I've moved twice. Different cities, different jobs trying to outrun it. But every few months it happens again. The silence, the weight in the air, that faint, impossible glow somewhere behind the clouds. And each time, I wake up feeling a little more disconnected. Like pieces of time are missing. Like parts of me are being slowly taken away. Sometimes, late at night, I'll go outside and stare up at the sky. I can't see them, not really. But I know they're still there. Watching, waiting. Story 4. This happened 3 years ago, and I still don't understand what I saw. Every time I think about it, I start shaking without meaning to. I've told only one person. The kind of friend who doesn't laugh when you say you saw something you can't explain. It was late September. I was driving back from my cousin's place, a small town, about an hour outside of where I lived. The route was mostly farmland, open fields on both sides, the occasional barn light flickering in the distance. It was close to midnight, and the only sound in the car was the steady hum of the tires on the road. I'd taken that drive dozens of times before, but that night felt different. The sky looked wrong. There weren't any stars, just a thick gray stillness above, like a heavy ceiling of cloud that didn't move. I remember turning the radio down and realizing how quiet it was outside. Not peaceful quiet, empty quiet. No wind, no crickets, no rustling. Just silence pressing in. A few miles ahead, something bright caught my attention in the rearview mirror. I thought it was another car at first, but it wasn't headlights. It was a single light. White with a faint blue edge, moving fast, but not in a straight line. It drifted, then stopped. Then it drifted again, like it was searching for something. I slowed down, feeling my chest tighten. My hands were damp on the steering wheel. The light moved closer, so bright it reflected off the road behind me. Then, without warning, it shot straight up into the sky and disappeared. I stared at the mirror for a long time after that, trying to calm myself down. I told myself it had to be a plane, maybe a drone, anything else. But before I could finish convincing myself, I saw another light, this time ahead of me. It was lower, hovering just above the treetops in the distance. The light wasn't blinking or moving. It just stayed there, a perfect white sphere in the middle of the dark road. I slowed the car to a crawl. My heart was hammering so hard that I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I thought about turning around, but before I could, the light began to move, slowly, deliberately, closer to the road. The air in the car felt heavier, almost electric. My skin tingled. I could see the interior of my car faintly glowing from it. I stopped completely, gripping the wheel, too afraid to breathe. The light hovered maybe 50 feet ahead of me now. I couldn't see what was behind it, but there was something there, something massive and darker than the sky itself. Then everything went black. The dashboard lights, the radio, even the headlights. My car shut off completely. I sat there in the dark, heart pounding, hands shaking, the silence so deep I could hear my own breathing echo inside the cabin. Then, from outside, I felt it, like a vibration in the air. It wasn't sound exactly. It was pressure, a low pulse I could feel in my ribs. The light grew brighter, spreading across the windshield, until I had to shield my eyes. The air smelled like metal, sharp and dry. I couldn't think, couldn't move, and just before everything went completely white, I thought I saw a shape inside the glow. Tall, thin, motionless. Then I wasn't in the car anymore. When I opened my eyes, I was lying in the middle of the road. The first thing I noticed was the cold, the kind that burns your skin and settles in your bones. My mouth was dry, my heart still racing like I'd been running for hours. I could see my car a few yards away, engine still off, headlights dead. The light was gone. The sky above me was perfectly clear now, filled with stars. I tried to stand, but my legs felt weak, shaky, like they didn't belong to me. My clothes were damp, and there was a faint metallic smell lingering in the air. I remember running my hands over my arms. They were trembling uncontrollably. And when I looked down, I noticed something strange. There was a mark on my wrist. A small, perfectly round patch of skin that looked slightly darker, almost like it had been burned. It didn't hurt, but it felt wrong, as if it didn't belong to me. I got back into the car, locked the doors out of instinct, and turned the key. The engine started like nothing had happened. The clock on the dashboard blinked 3:17 a.m. The last time I remembered looking at it, it had been just after midnight. Somehow, 3 hours had passed. I drove home faster than I ever have in my life. I kept checking the mirrors, half expecting to see that light again behind me, but the road stayed empty. Every sound made me jump. The hum of the tires, the faint creak of the steering wheel, my own breathing. When I finally reached my house, I didn't even bother parking straight. I just went inside, locked every door, and sat in the dark for a long time. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that white glow filling everything, pressing against my chest until it felt like I couldn't breathe. Eventually, I fell asleep on the couch. When I woke up, the morning light was spilling through the blinds, and for a second, I almost convinced myself it had all been a dream. But when I looked at my wrist, the mark was still there. That entire day felt wrong. The air seemed too still. Sounds were too sharp. Footsteps upstairs, the refrigerator hum, even the floor creaking beneath my weight. Everything around me felt louder, closer. I kept glancing at the windows, expecting to see that same light hovering outside. That night, I woke up suddenly. Not from a sound, but from a feeling, like someone was standing close by. My heart started racing again. The air in my bedroom felt heavy, the same way it had out there on the road. I stared at the ceiling, listening. Nothing moved, but the silence had weight to it. Then I noticed something else. A faint glow was spilling through the curtains. Not bright, not flashing, steady. White with that same blue edge. I froze. My chest tightened, my breath coming shallow and fast. I couldn't tell how far away it was, but it was there. I told myself not to look, but I did. I pulled the curtain back just an inch and my stomach dropped. The light was hovering above the tree line, maybe 100 yards from my house. It wasn't moving. And then it began to rise. Slowly, straight up, disappearing into the sky until it was just another star. I stood there, staring long after it was gone, my whole body shaking. When I finally stepped back from the window, I realized I could still feel that faint pressure in my chest, the same pulse from before, deep and rhythmic, as if something far away was still watching. For the next few weeks, I tried to forget about it. I avoided that road completely, started sleeping with the lights on, and told myself that stress and exhaustion could make people imagine things. But deep down, I knew it wasn't imagination. Every night before I fell asleep, I felt that same quiet pressure in the air, the one I'd felt in the car, just before everything went white. One night, I woke up again. It was just past 2 in the morning. The house was silent, but not in the peaceful way you expect at that hour. It was the same kind of silence from before, dense, deliberate. My chest tightened as I realized I couldn't hear the usual nighttime sounds. No insects, no cars in the distance, not even the faint buzz of electricity. I sat up slowly, my body cold and tense. The digital clock on my nightstand had frozen, the numbers faintly glowing 2:14. The second I noticed it, the air changed. A soft vibration started somewhere beneath the floor, spreading up through the bed, through my bones. It wasn't sound, it was something deeper, something that made my heartbeat stutter. I tried to move, but felt unsteady, like the room itself was subtly shifting. The walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting in slow rhythm. I looked toward the window, even though I already knew what I'd see. The light was back. It hung low over the trees behind my house, brighter than before, pulsing faintly. My breath quickened, and I felt the same strange sensation in my head, as if someone was whispering directly into my thoughts. Not words exactly, but impressions, a pull, an invitation. My body felt weightless. I don't remember getting out of bed, but suddenly I was standing in the yard, barefoot in the cold grass. The air was still. My heart pounded so hard that my vision blurred at the edges. The light expanded, stretching wider than my house, and I could see faint shapes moving within it. Tall, narrow outlines, drifting as though weightless. I couldn't move, couldn't think. I just stood there watching as the glow washed over me. The metallic taste filled my mouth again, and for a moment, everything went silent inside my head. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the light began to fade, rising higher into the sky until it vanished completely. I was left standing in darkness, shaking uncontrollably, my breath coming in short bursts. I looked down and realized there were faint footprints in the grass around me, not mine. The next thing I remember is being inside, sitting on the floor near the front door hours later. The clock on the wall said 5:38 a.m. My phone was on the table beside me, screen black but warm to the touch, like it had just been used. There was a new mark on my arm, just below the first one. Another perfect circle. Since then, it's never really stopped. Sometimes I wake up outside with no memory of how I got there. Sometimes I hear the faint vibration again, somewhere high above, just before the world goes quiet. And every time it happens, I feel that same pull inside my chest, like a reminder that whatever I saw that night wasn't finished with me yet. When people ask why I don't drive at night anymore, I tell them I just prefer the daylight. But that's not the truth. The truth is, when the sky goes quiet, I know they're near. Story 5. I'll never forget that night. Not because of what I saw, but because of how real it felt, how wrong everything seemed, as if the world had briefly slipped out of place and no one else noticed. It happened 3 summers ago. I was driving back from a weekend trip to visit my cousin in a small mountain town about 4 hours from where I live. It was late, around midnight, and the highway was nearly empty. The only sound was the steady hum of my car engine and the faint whine of the tires on the pavement. I remember feeling relaxed, maybe even sleepy, until I noticed the lights. At first, I thought they were just stars, but they were moving, slowly at first, then with these sharp, deliberate turns that no plane or helicopter could make. There were 3 of them, in a triangle formation, gliding silently above the tree line. I told myself they were drones. That seemed like the simplest explanation. But drones don't hover completely still for minutes at a time, not that high up. The lights suddenly dimmed, and for a few seconds the sky went completely black. My headlights flickered. I felt this strange pressure in my ears, like when you're on a plane and it's descending too fast. I turned the radio on just to have some noise, but all I got was static, then this low, pulsing hum that made my chest vibrate. I switched it off right away. I tried to laugh it off, told myself I was overreacting. But as I kept driving, I realized the lights weren't in the sky anymore. They were following the road ahead of me. Not behind, ahead. Almost like they were waiting. I slowed down, heart thudding, watching as the lights hovered just above the road about half a mile ahead. Then they started moving again, drifting lower, closer to the ground. My first thought was to turn around, but something in me couldn't. I just kept driving, like I was being pulled forward without wanting to be. When I finally got closer, I realized it wasn't three separate lights. It was one object. Massive. Silent. Metallic. Its surface seemed to ripple like water, even though it was solid. I couldn't see any windows or markings, just this smooth, shifting surface that reflected the moonlight in strange ways. I don't know why, but I stopped the car right there in the middle of the highway. Everything went quiet. No crickets, no wind, nothing. Just the soft hum of the idling engine and my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I sat there, staring, unable to look away. Then, without sound or motion, it was suddenly above me. The car engine died. The dashboard lights went out. My phone screen went black. I tried to move, but my arms felt heavy, my breathing shallow. It was like the air itself had thickened. And then the world turned white. When I opened my eyes, everything looked different. The car was still there, but the highway was gone. It was as if the world had been erased and replaced by a vast, empty field, stretching endlessly in every direction. There were no stars, no moon, just a dim gray light that didn't seem to come from anywhere. I don't remember getting out of the car, but suddenly I was standing beside it. My legs were shaking. The ground beneath my feet wasn't grass or dirt. It was smooth, cold, and faintly reflective like polished stone. Every sound I made felt muted, swallowed by the air. The object, whatever it was, hovered above me now, completely silent. Up close, it wasn't as metallic as I first thought. Its surface looked alive, constantly shifting in patterns that made my vision blur if I stared too long. I could feel warmth radiating from it, pulsing faintly, almost like a heartbeat. I wanted to run, but my body wouldn't listen. My mind screamed for me to move, to do something, but I just stood there, breathing unevenly, my chest tightening with every second. I remember feeling watched, not by eyes exactly, but by something conscious, something aware. Then, out of nowhere, there was a sudden flash of light, not bright, soft, but so consuming that I felt it sink into me rather than around me. My skin tingled. My head felt heavy, filled with a faint buzzing sound that wasn't really sound at all. It was inside me. Thoughts that weren't mine began brushing against my mind. Flickers of images, shapes, faces I didn't recognize. Some of them human, some not. I felt a pull, gentle but absolute, lifting me slightly off the ground. My body floated inches above the surface, arms limp at my sides. I couldn't breathe properly. My eyes rolled upward, and for a moment I saw inside the object. Or maybe I only imagined it. There were forms moving in the light, tall, thin silhouettes that shifted like smoke, but stood with intention, like they were studying me. I tried to speak. I don't know why. Maybe I thought if I said something, I'd break whatever was happening. But my voice came out wrong. Like the sound was being delayed, stretched. I couldn't even hear my own words clearly. Then everything changed again. The air rippled and a wave of dizziness hit me so hard I dropped to my knees. The light dimmed. The ground started to spin and I felt myself falling, Not backward or forward, just away. I blinked, and I was back on the highway. The car was running, headlights on, radio silent. The sky was clear again, filled with stars. For a few seconds, I didn't move. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles hurt. My watch said it was 12:47 a.m. I checked my phone. It said 3:02. Over 2 hours had passed. I looked around trying to spot any sign of the object, but the road was empty. Just the hum of the engine and the faint rustle of wind through the trees. Everything looked normal, but nothing felt right. My body ached, especially my arms, and there was this strange metallic taste in my mouth that wouldn't go away. When I finally started driving again, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still with me, like whatever had been in that light hadn't fully let go. The drive home felt endless. Every passing mile marker looked the same, and the darkness around me seemed thicker than usual. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see those lights again. But the road behind me stayed empty. Still, I couldn't shake the sense that I was being observed. When I finally reached my neighborhood, it was nearly 4 a.m. The streets were quiet, my house completely dark. I parked the car and sat there for a long time, just breathing, trying to convince myself I hadn't lost my mind. The world around me was normal again, too normal. Even the crickets had started up. But when I stepped out of the car, I noticed something that froze me. My shoes were covered in a thin gray dust. It wasn't dirt, not ash either, more like powdered stone. I brushed some off onto my hand. It shimmered faintly under the porch light, leaving a faint residue that clung to my skin, no matter how hard I rubbed. I took a long shower, but the metallic taste in my mouth was still there. When I finally looked in the mirror, I noticed something on my neck. 3 small, evenly spaced marks, almost perfectly round. They weren't bruises or cuts, just faint indentations like pressure points. They didn't hurt, but touching them made my stomach twist. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of that gray light. The silhouettes in the haze, the strange shapes that felt like they were trying to communicate without words. And under all of it, I kept feeling that low vibration in my chest. The same hum I'd heard on the highway, now echoing faintly inside me. For weeks after, I tried to tell myself it was stress or exhaustion. I even went to a doctor, but he said I was fine. Blood pressure normal, scans clear. He joked that I needed a vacation. I almost laughed, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of uncertainty. Like he wanted to say more, but didn't. Things only got worse at night. My electronics started acting up, my phone freezing, the TV switching channels on its own. One night I woke up to the light in my room flickering, and for a split second, I saw a reflection in the window, tall, motionless, featureless. When I blinked, it was gone. I haven't told many people this story. Most wouldn't believe me, and honestly, I wish I didn't believe it myself. But every so often I'll be driving late, and I'll see a flash in the distance. 3 pale lights forming that same triangle. And when that happens, everything goes quiet again. The air feels heavier. My ears ring. And deep down, I know they're still out there. Watching, waiting. Story 6. It happened 2 years ago, late September. I was living alone back then, renting this small house on the edge of town. My backyard opened into a wide stretch of field, tall grass, broken fences, and power lines that buzzed faintly when the wind was right. It was quiet out there. Too quiet sometimes. That night I couldn't sleep. I remember lying in bed, scrolling through my phone, when I noticed this soft flicker on the ceiling, like a car's headlights passing by the window. But there was no sound of an engine, just the faint, steady hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I got up and looked through the blinds. The sky was unusually clear, every star visible, but there was something else, something low, bright, and moving slowly above the fields. It wasn't blinking like a plane or drifting like a satellite. It just glided, silent and deliberate. I stood there for a long time, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe a drone. Maybe my eyes playing tricks on me. But then it stopped, completely still in the sky, and the light began to pulse. Each pulse lit up the grass below, spreading across the field like a soft wave of daylight. I should have gone back inside, but curiosity got the better of me. I stepped out into the yard. The air was cold, still. Every sound seemed muffled, as if the world was holding its breath. I stared up, squinting, trying to make out a shape behind the light. My heart was beating too fast, my breath coming in the shallow bursts. Then the light brightened again, and I could see it. Smooth, metallic, perfectly round. No wings, no rotors, no visible seams, just floating. My phone started glitching, the screen flickering even though I hadn't touched it. I could feel a faint vibration under my feet, like the ground itself was humming. The thing started to move, slowly at first, then faster, angling directly toward my house. I stumbled backward, my body locked between fear and disbelief. I ran inside and slammed the door, pressing my back against it. The entire living room glowed faintly blue through the windows. Then everything went dark. The lights in the house flickered off. The fridge stopped humming. Even the air felt heavy, thick. I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. I tried to move toward my bedroom, but halfway down the hall I froze. The front window was glowing again, bright enough to cast my shadow against the wall. I don't know what made me look, but I did. Through the glass, I saw shapes moving in the light. Not people. Too tall, too thin, their movements too fluid. And then, just like that, the light vanished. Everything went black. When I opened my eyes, the house was completely still. No lights, no sound, nothing. My watch had stopped. My phone was dead. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd just fallen asleep and dreamt it all. But then I noticed something. My curtains were moving, slowly swaying, even though every window was closed. The air smelled different, too, like metal and rain, even though the sky had been clear all night. I tried to steady my breathing, to think rationally. But there was this faint buzzing in my head that wouldn't stop, like a vibration deep in my skull. It made me dizzy. I walked to the window, careful not to make any noise, and pulled the curtain just enough to look outside. The field was glowing, not bright, just a soft silver light that seemed to come from the grass itself. I could see patterns burned into it, perfect circles etched into the soil. My first thought was that someone had landed a helicopter out there, but the circles were too large, too precise, and there were no tracks leading in or out. Just the marks, as if the ground had been pressed down by something enormous and weightless at the same time. Then I realized the light wasn't just in the field. It was inside the house, too, faint and shifting, like mist that had seeped through the walls. It shimmered across the floorboards, and when it touched my feet, the skin tingled. I backed away quickly, my heart racing. That's when I felt it. A change in the air pressure. Subtle but real, like the whole house was inhaling. The floor beneath me seemed to pulse once, and then everything went still again. I turned toward the hallway, and there was a faint shape standing at the far end. It wasn't solid. It looked almost transparent, as if light was bending around it. My body went cold. Every instinct told me to hide, but I couldn't move. The shape tilted its head, slow and deliberate, and I could feel it noticing me. I didn't hear words, but something pressed against my mind. A thought that wasn't mine. like an echo that didn't belong to me. I don't remember running, but somehow I ended up outside again. The field was still glowing, but now there were more shapes, 3, maybe 4 of them, standing at the center of the circles. They didn't walk or move like people. They seemed to glide, their limbs too long, their movements too precise. The hum in my head grew stronger until it became painful, and then everything shifted again. My vision blurred. The world seemed to stretch and fold, and I felt my body being pulled upward. I remember grabbing for the ground, feeling the wet grass between my fingers, but it slipped away like air. There was light everywhere, bright, cold, endless, and then silence. When I came to, I was lying in my bed. The curtains were still swaying. The power was back on. My phone screen glowed weakly beside me, showing the time, 3:33 a.m. I had no memory of getting back inside, and my clothes were damp, streaked with soil. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. For the rest of the night, I couldn't move. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, waiting for something else to happen. But nothing did. Just that strange silence that seemed to settle into everything. Morning came slowly. The light through the curtains felt unnatural, too pale, like sunlight filtered through fog. My head throbbed and my body ached as if I'd been carrying something heavy all night. When I finally got out of bed, I noticed the time on my watch. It was still stuck at 12:14. The same moment everything had gone dark, I went outside to check the field. The air was still and dew clung to the grass, but the marks were real. Perfect circles scorched into the earth, spiraling toward the center in patterns I couldn't recognize. The soil was blackened, yet cold to the touch. I walked to the middle of one of the circles, and the strangest thing happened. Every sound faded. My breathing, my heartbeat, even the faint hum of distant cars, it all vanished. For a moment, it was like standing inside pure silence. I stepped out quickly, heart pounding again, and as soon as I did, the sounds came rushing back. Birds, wind, my own breathing, all of it. That's when I realized I wasn't alone. Across the field, near the tree line, someone or something was standing there. The figure was motionless, facing me. Too far to see clearly, but I knew it wasn't just a person. It was tall, thin, and still. The same way I'd seen it in the house. I blinked, and it was gone. After that, I couldn't stay there anymore. I packed up and left that same day. Moved back into the city. Told myself it was just a stress-induced hallucination, or maybe a dream that got out of control. But deep down, I knew better. For a few weeks, everything seemed normal. I went back to work, tried to ignore the nightmares, dreams of floating light, of weightless air and strange whispers in my head. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, my body sore, my heart racing. But then, little things started happening again. Street lights flickering when I walked past. Static burst through my car radio no matter the station. My reflection sometimes looked slightly delayed, like it wasn't keeping up. I'd wake up with faint bruises on my arms, arranged in patterns too symmetrical to be random. Last month, I got a call from the new tenant who rented the house. He sounded uneasy. He said the power kept cutting out at the same time every night, 12 to 14, and that he'd seen strange lights over the field. He asked if that had ever happened when I lived there. I told him no. I lied. Sometimes when I can't sleep, I look out my apartment window and stare at the sky. There's always one light that seems too still, too bright, just hovering there, among the stars. I try to ignore it, but it always finds my window eventually. It's happening again tonight. The same low vibration in my chest. The same pressure in my ears. My phone keeps losing signal, and the light outside is growing brighter. I think they're coming back. And this time, I don't think they ever really left. Story 7. Sometimes I tell myself it was a dream or some kind of hallucination brought on by exhaustion. But deep down, I know what I saw was real. It started on a road trip I took by myself. I was driving through the desert late at night, somewhere between Nevada and Utah, after visiting a friend. I had been on the road for hours, the kind of quiet stretch where even the radio can't find a station. Just the hum of the tires and the sound of the wind brushing against the car. The sky was unbelievably clear, so many stars that it almost looked fake. I remember feeling strangely peaceful, even though I was the only car for miles. That changed when I saw a flash of light cut across the sky. It wasn't a shooting star, it stopped midair. At first, I thought it might be a plane, but planes don't hover, and they definitely don't move the way this thing did. It drifted sideways, then darted up, fast, sharper than anything I'd ever seen. I slowed down without meaning to, staring out my windshield. Then my headlights flickered. Once, twice, then they went completely out. The engine was still running, but the lights died. The darkness that followed was thick, almost unnatural, like the world had been turned off. I pulled over, hands trembling on the steering wheel, trying to convince myself it was just a glitch. The air felt heavy, and there was this low hum, not loud, but deep enough that I could feel it in my chest. It wasn't coming from the car, it was coming from everywhere. I got out thinking maybe it was some kind of electrical thing. The moment my feet hit the gravel, I realized how silent it was. No wind, no insects, nothing. Just that vibration in the air that made my bones ache. Then I saw it. A circular object, hovering maybe 100 feet above the desert floor. No sound, no flames, no wings. Just this perfect metallic surface reflecting the stars. The light from it wasn't like anything I'd ever seen. Soft, white, and alive somehow. It didn't illuminate the ground the way a flashlight would. It shimmered, like heat rising from asphalt. I wanted to run, but my body wouldn't move. My breathing turned shallow, my throat dry. Every instinct screamed to get back in the car, but I couldn't look away. The object shifted slightly, tilting as if it were studying me. My skin prickled all over. And then the hum grew stronger. The air thickened, pressing against me, pulling at my clothes, my hair. My heart was racing so fast I thought I might pass out. And right before I could blink, everything went white. And when I opened my eyes, I wasn't in my car anymore. At least not how I remembered it. Everything was bathed in this pale blue light, soft but blinding at the same time. My head felt heavy, my mouth dry. I tried to move, but my limbs didn't respond the way they should have. It took me a moment to realize I was lying on something flat and cold. The surface wasn't metal. It felt too smooth, almost like glass, yet it seemed to shift faintly beneath me as if it were alive. The air around me was still. I couldn't hear my own breathing at first. It was like sound itself had been taken away. And when I finally managed to lift my head, I saw shapes moving in the light. Not clearly, just outlines. They were tall and thin, their edges blurred as though I were seeing them through heat waves. I couldn't make out faces, but I could feel them watching me. Not with curiosity, with purpose. A faint vibration began somewhere near my spine, spreading slowly up through my body. My chest tightened. I tried to call out, but my voice didn't come. My throat moved, but there was no sound. It was like being underwater. Then something changed. The light above me dimmed and the space shifted colors from blue to gray. One of the shapes came closer. I couldn't see its features, but its movement was unnaturally fluid, precise. My mind kept trying to make sense of what I was seeing, but nothing about it fit any logic I knew. For a second, it felt like it was inside my head. My thoughts weren't my own. Flashes of images passed through my mind. skies filled with lights, endless fields of black glass, and someone, standing in a place I didn't recognize but felt disturbingly familiar. I don't know how long I was there. Time didn't feel real. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might burst. Then, suddenly, everything around me started to dissolve. The light, the shapes, even the soundless air. I felt myself falling or being pushed, or maybe both. When I came to, I was sitting in the driver's seat of my car. The engine was off, but the headlights were on, shining dimly across the desert road. My hands were trembling on the steering wheel, my shirt damp with sweat. The hum was gone. The night was quiet again, too quiet. I looked at my phone to check the time. It was 3:17 a.m. I remembered glancing at the clock before everything happened. It had been 11:49. Almost 3.5 hours had passed. I hadn't gone anywhere. My car wouldn't start at first. I just sat there, shivering, trying to steady my breathing, staring at the spot where the light had been. The stars above were still, untouched, like nothing had happened. But the ground beside the road wasn't the same. There was a circular patch of scorched earth, perfectly even, blackened, the dirt fused into a strange, glassy texture. I didn't dare get out to look closer. I just drove. And the whole time, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still in the car with me. I made it home just before sunrise. The drive was a blur. I don't remember most of it, only that every few minutes I caught myself checking the mirrors, expecting to see headlights behind me that never appeared. The silence inside the car felt heavier than it should have, like the air itself didn't want to move. When I finally parked, I sat there for a long time, unable to step out. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I tried to tell myself I'd fallen asleep on the side of the road, that everything had been a dream. But there were things I couldn't ignore. My phone battery, which had been half full, was completely dead. The radio was stuck on static, and when I looked down at my wrist, the time on my watch was still frozen at 11:49. The same moment everything went dark. Inside my house, everything was exactly as I'd left it. But it didn't feel right. The air carried the same metallic scent I'd noticed out there in the desert, faint but sharp. I kept hearing a low hum that wasn't really a sound, more like a vibration deep inside my chest. It pulsed slowly, in rhythm with my heartbeat. When I went to wash my face, I saw something in the mirror that made my stomach drop. On the side of my neck, just below my jaw, were 3 small circular marks, evenly spaced, almost identical. They weren't bruises. They weren't burns. They were too perfect, too deliberate. I pressed my fingers against them and felt a strange warmth, as if something was moving just beneath the skin. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of that white light, those shapeless figures, that feeling of being watched without eyes. I told no one. I didn't want to sound insane, and a part of me wanted to believe it would fade if I ignored it. But it didn't. Over the next few weeks, little things started happening. The lights in my house would dim for a second when I passed underneath them. My phone would glitch whenever I tried to record the night sky. And sometimes, late at night, I'd wake up with that same vibration running through my body, strong enough to rattle the bed frame. I moved out of that house after 2 months. I couldn't take it anymore. The silence, the static, the feeling that something was always standing just outside my window. I told myself I'd leave it all behind, that distance would help. But last week, it happened again. I was driving home from work, just outside the city, when I saw it. The same white light hovering low over the horizon, pulsing softly, waiting. My chest tightened. My phone lost signal. The radio went dead. I wanted to turn around, but I couldn't. The hum started again, faint but growing, as if it had never really gone away. It's outside right now as I write this. I can see the light through the blinds, cutting across the room in slow, steady waves. I don't know what it wants or why it came back, but I think this time it isn't just watching. Story 8. It was late summer, about 3 years ago. I'd driven out to my uncle's property to feed his dogs while he was out of town. He owned this old farmhouse miles from anywhere, just empty fields, a few trees, and a dirt road that felt like it stretched into nothing. I'd been there plenty of times before, but that night felt different from the moment I stepped out of the car. The air was unusually still. No wind, no insects, not even the dogs barking like they always did when they heard my car. Just this strange, deep quiet. I told myself it was the heat. Late August always did something strange to the air, but as I walked toward the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The porch light flickered as I reached for the door. Inside, everything looked normal. The air smelled faintly of old wood and hay, like always. I fed the dogs, checked the back door, and was about to leave when I noticed something outside the window. A light over the field. At first, I thought it was a plane, but it wasn't moving like one. It drifted too slowly, almost floating, and the color wasn't right either. It wasn't white or yellow. It was this pale bluish light, soft but unnaturally bright against the night sky. I stepped outside to get a better look. The dogs didn't follow me. They just stayed inside, low to the ground, whining softly. That's when I realized how quiet it really was. No crickets, no frogs, not even the distant hum of power lines. Just that light, hanging perfectly still over the field. My first thought was to grab my phone, but when I tried, the screen wouldn't turn on. Dead battery. I'd charged it before I left, so that didn't make sense. I glanced up again, and now the light was lower, closer. I could feel something in the air, a faint vibration in my chest, like when you stand too close to a subwoofer. Then it started to move, slowly at first, gliding sideways, then stopping directly above the field. The light grew brighter, spilling across the grass in a perfect circle. I took a step forward, half expecting to hear a sound, an engine, a hum, anything. But there was nothing, just stillness. And then the power in the house went out. The porch light died. The world went completely dark, except for that glowing circle in the middle of the field. I felt my stomach twist as the vibration in the air deepened. The dogs started barking again, but not like normal. They were panicked, desperate, like something was hurting them. I froze halfway between the door and the yard. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Then, slowly, the light began to fade, and I saw something inside it. Something tall, thin, moving. It took me a moment to realize what I was seeing. The figure wasn't walking, it was gliding, like its feet never touched the ground. My eyes kept losing focus every time I tried to look straight at it, like my mind refused to process what was there. Its outline shimmered, blending with the light in a way that made it seem half transparent. I took a slow step backward toward the porch, trying not to make a sound. My throat felt dry, my breathing shallow. The dogs were still barking inside the house, scratching at the floor like they wanted to dig their way out. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. Then, all at once, the figure stopped. It turned. No, it shifted, facing directly toward me. Even from that distance, I felt a kind of pressure, like its attention pressed against me physically. My chest tightened. I couldn't tell if I was holding my breath or if something had taken it from me. The light flickered again, and for an instant I saw more than one of them. 3, maybe 4 shapes, all the same. Tall, weightless, almost human, but not quite. They didn't have faces that I could see, just the faintest impression of eyes that reflected the blue glow like glass. The circle of light began to narrow, drawing in closer to the ground. The air felt heavier, as if gravity had thickened around me. My hair lifted slightly, my arms tingling with static. The temperature dropped so fast I could see the vapor of my breath. Without thinking, I bolted back inside the house. I slammed the door shut and pressed my back against it, my whole body shaking. The moment I was inside, the barking stopped. Just like that, silence again. No sound at all. I grabbed the flashlight from the counter, but it wouldn't turn on. The batteries had worked earlier, I was sure of it. I stood there in the dark, trying to calm myself, trying to make sense of it. Maybe it was a drone. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. Maybe a faint blue light began to glow through the cracks in the window frame. It wasn't coming from outside anymore. It was inside the house. The living room was filled with that same pale shimmer, spreading slowly across the walls and floor like fog illuminated from within. My skin prickled. I could hear something faint, a low vibration in my chest more than in my ears. I couldn't tell if it was sound or something else entirely. I took one step toward the window and froze. The light was moving again, forming a shape in front of the couch, one of those same figures, but smaller, closer. It turned its head toward me. I felt everything inside me go cold. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My vision blurred, my knees went weak, and the light pulsed once, bright enough to blind me. Then everything went black. When I opened my eyes, the light was gone. I was lying on the floor in the living room, staring at the ceiling. My watch said it was 4:17 a.m. I had no memory of what happened after the flash. The house was completely silent again. I sat up slowly, every part of my body trembling. The air smelled strange, metallic, almost burnt, like ozone after lightning. The dogs were gone. Their leashes were still by the door, their bowls still full, but the house felt empty in a way that made my stomach twist. I tried to tell myself it was just a blackout, that I had fainted from panic, that the dogs had somehow slipped out through a door I forgot to close. But when I stepped outside, the ground told a different story. The grass in the field was flattened in a perfect circle. Not burned, just pressed down, like something impossibly heavy had hovered just above it. My flashlight worked again then, and when I shined it over the circle, I saw my own footprints leading out into the center and stopping there. No footprints coming back. I couldn't remember walking out that far. The sky above the trees was perfectly clear, no lights, no clouds, no sound. But the silence felt unnatural, like the air itself was holding its breath. I kept waiting for a distant car, a bird, anything to remind me I was still in my own world. Nothing came. I stayed outside until the sun started to rise, and when the first light hit the trees, something strange happened. The circle of grass began to shimmer slightly, like dew reflecting colors that shouldn't exist. I blinked, and the shimmer disappeared. Later that morning, I drove into town. My phone finally picked up signal again, and I saw a few local posts about a power outage during the night. No one mentioned lights in the sky. No one mentioned missing animals. It was as if it never happened. That was 3 years ago. The dogs never came back. I've moved twice since then, but I still wake up some nights to that same cold feeling in my chest, that pressure of being watched. Sometimes the lights flicker, and for a split second, I see the faint outline of that same blue shimmer across the wall. I never told anyone this before. I know how it sounds. Crazy, impossible. But it happened. and every time I look out into a dark field, part of me still expects to see that pale glow waiting for me again. Whatever they were, they found me once, and I don't think they ever really left. Story 9. I'll never forget that night. I know everyone says that when they start some creepy story, but this one, it changed the way I see the sky. It happened 3 summers ago, around early August. I was driving back from my cousin's cabin in northern Idaho, this remote stretch surrounded by pine trees and open fields that felt endless once the sun went down. The kind of place where you lose phone signal for hours. I left late, around 11 p.m., thinking I could make it home by 2. The road was empty. No headlights, no signs of life, just the hum of my engine and the occasional chirp of crickets when I cracked the window. I remember the air being strangely still, like the world was holding its breath. Then I saw it. At first, I thought it was just a plane, a single white light moving low across the horizon. But as I watched, it didn't blink like aircraft lights do. It stayed solid, steady. Then another light appeared beside it. Then another. 3 perfect orbs aligned in a triangle formation, gliding silently above the tree line. I slowed down and pulled to the side of the road. The engine idled softly as I stared. They weren't moving fast, but something about them felt wrong. Too precise, too synchronized. The lights shifted colors, white to amber to a dull red, pulsing like they were breathing. I grabbed my phone to record, but the screen froze the second I hit record. I tried again, same thing. My heart started racing. I told myself it was just bad signal, or my phone overheating, but the truth is, I could feel something in the air. A faint vibration that seemed to crawl through the car's metal frame and into my chest. I turned the engine off to listen. Silence. No crickets now, no wind, just this low humming sound like distant electricity. The lights began to move closer. Not fast, just deliberate, floating as if they were curious about me. My pulse hammered in my ears. I remember my breathing getting shallow, my hand gripping the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles went white. Then, without warning, all 3 lights blinked out at once. Total darkness. I sat there, staring into the blackness where they'd been. My eyes adjusted, and for a moment I thought maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. I even laughed nervously to myself. But then the inside of my car flickered, just once, as if a flashbulb went off. I looked out the windshield again, and that's when I saw something that made my stomach twist. About 30 feet ahead, in the middle of the road, was a figure. It wasn't walking toward me, it was just standing there. Tall, thin, with limbs that didn't look quite right. I couldn't see its face, only the outline against the faint glow of the moon. My body froze. Every instinct screamed at me to drive, but I couldn't move. It felt like the air itself had thickened, pressing against me, slowing my thoughts. I just sat there, staring at that figure as the seconds stretched, and then it lifted its arm, slowly, pointing directly at me. That broke whatever trance I was in. I started the engine, slammed the gear into drive, and tore down the road. I didn't even look back. I don't know how fast I was going, but the trees blurred past like shadows in a tunnel. I just needed to get away. But after a few miles, something made me glance at the rearview mirror. There was a faint light behind me, and it was getting closer. The light behind me grew brighter, closing the distance no matter how fast I drove. It wasn't a car. There were no headlights, no beam hitting the trees ahead of me. It was just a sphere of white light, perfectly round, gliding over the road in absolute silence. My palms were slick on the steering wheel. I remember whispering to myself, "It's not real. It's not real." trying to force my brain to believe it was some trick of the eyes, a drone, anything explainable. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The air inside the car felt heavier the closer it came, like pressure building inside my ears. Then my radio turned on by itself. Static hissed through the speakers, loud and sharp. The volume dial spun on its own, flicking from quiet to almost unbearable. I hit the button to turn it off, but it stayed on, the sound shifting into short bursts of garbled noise like a voice trying to form words, but failing. I pressed harder on the gas. My speedometer hit 90, maybe more. The road curved, and I could see a stretch of open field beyond the trees. I thought if I could just reach that clearing, maybe I'd find another car, a house, something. But the light followed, steady and deliberate. When I glanced in the mirror again, I realized there wasn't just one anymore. There were three. The same triangular formation I'd seen earlier, keeping perfect distance from each other, perfectly aligned. That's when the engine began to stutter. The headlights dimmed, then flickered. The car jolted once, twice, and then the engine died completely. Everything went black except for the faint glow from those lights outside. I sat there gripping the wheel, the silence pressing against my ears. I tried the ignition. Nothing. Not even a click. Then I noticed something strange. The air outside shimmered, like heat waves rising off asphalt, even though the night was cold. And the lights, those orbs, were descending, slow and controlled, until they hovered just above the road. I could feel my heart pounding so violently it almost hurt. My breathing was short and uneven. Every part of me wanted to move, to run, but my legs refused to cooperate. It was like being pinned in place by invisible hands. For a few seconds, the lights just hung there. Then a beam, thin, pale, and silent, extended from the center one, touching the hood of my car. The metal began to vibrate softly, as though something was scanning through it. My phone, which had been dead since I tried recording earlier, lit up on its own. The screen was blank white, but I could feel a faint warmth coming from it. I remember trying to cover my eyes because the light outside was too bright. But even through my eyelids, I saw flashes, shapes, maybe, or shadows, something moving inside that beam. And then, for a moment, I wasn't in the car anymore. Well, it's hard to explain. It wasn't like being pulled or moved. It was more like my body stayed, but my mind didn't. Everything went weightless. There was a hum in the distance, steady and low, and when I opened my eyes, I was standing in a space I couldn't recognize. Smooth metal walls curved in every direction, seamless and glowing with faint light. There were no corners, no visible source of illumination. Just that dim, colorless brightness that made everything feel dreamlike. Something was in front of me, tall, motionless, watching, its outline blurred as if the air itself couldn't decide what it looked like. I tried to speak, to move, but nothing happened. Then I felt it, not in my ears, but inside my head, a presence pressing into my thoughts, like someone flipping through pages of a book that belonged to me. My chest tightened. I tried to fight it, but it wasn't a struggle of strength. It was like trying to stop someone from reading your mind. The air pulsed once, and the presence grew stronger. Then, suddenly, I was back in my car. The headlights were on again. The engine was running. The road was empty. But something felt wrong. The air was colder, the world too quiet. I looked at the clock on the dashboard, 3:47 a.m. I had no memory of the last 2 hours. For a while, I just sat there, frozen behind the wheel, staring at the time on the dashboard. It made no sense. I had left my cousin's cabin around 11, and the drive should have taken 2 hours, maybe 2.5 at most. Somehow, almost 5 hours had passed. I checked my phone. It was working again. The battery was at 67%, but the screen brightness was dimmer than usual, almost grayish. When I tried to open the camera app, it froze. Then the phone powered off by itself. I started driving again, slower this time. The road seemed different, emptier, though I recognized the landmarks. The turn sign for Mill Creek, the rusted billboard by the old gas station. Everything was exactly where it should be. But the sky, God, the sky didn't look the same. The stars were sharper, almost too bright. I could see faint streaks of light moving far above, like satellites, except they weren't following any path I recognized. They drifted in slow, irregular lines, crossing each other's trails. I tried not to look at them anymore. When I finally reached home, the first thing I noticed was the silence. Not just outside, but in the air around me. It was like every sound was muffled. Even the gravel under my boots seemed too soft, too quiet. I went straight inside, locked the door, and sat in the dark for what felt like hours. I didn't tell anyone for a few days. Who would believe something like that? But there were changes. First thing I noticed was the ringing in my ears. A faint, constant hum, like background noise that never stopped. I thought it would fade, but it didn't. Then the headache started. Sharp, sudden flashes of pain behind my eyes, usually when I looked at bright light. The strangest thing, though, was the mark. It was small, right above my left shoulder blade, a thin, circular scar I swear wasn't there before. I could feel it sometimes, a faint warmth beneath the skin, like it pulsed in time with my heartbeat. When I touched it, a weird metallic taste filled my mouth. I tried to ignore it, but each night it would itch until I couldn't sleep. About a week later, I woke up in the middle of the night to find my bedroom light flickering on and off. Not in a random way. It was pulsing slowly, like a rhythm. My phone screen lit up at the same time, white again, just like it had in the car. I stared at it, too scared to move. And then, for a fraction of a second, I saw something reflected in the glass, tall, thin, standing behind me. When I turned around, there was nothing. Since that night, I've moved twice, different towns, different jobs, trying to start over. But the ringing never left. Sometimes it grows louder, especially when I'm outside at night. I try not to look at the sky anymore, but it's hard not to feel watched. Last week, I noticed the mark glowing faintly in the mirror, just for a second, like the reflection of a distant light. And the next morning, my phone had a new video saved in the gallery. I didn't take it. It showed a stretch of empty road under a bright moon, the same road where it all started. The file name was just a timestamp, 3:47 a.m. I deleted it immediately, but sometimes when the house is quiet, I still hear that low humming in the walls. And I can't help but wonder if they ever stopped watching, or if they're waiting for me to come back. Story 10. This happened a few years ago, and I still don't have an explanation for it. Every time I try to tell someone, I stop halfway because the words don't come out right. It sounds like something out of a movie, not something that could actually happen to a regular person like me. But it did. I remember every detail. I was living alone back then, in a small rental house on the outskirts of a quiet town in Oregon. It wasn't exactly isolated, but the nearest neighbor was about half a mile away, across a wide stretch of open field. At night, the place was pitch black. No streetlights, no distant cars, just the sound of the wind moving through the trees. It was late summer, one of those humid nights when the air feels thick enough to taste. I couldn't sleep. The power had flickered earlier from a storm, and though it came back, the house still felt strangely alive afterward, like there was a faint vibration under the floorboards. I told myself it was just my imagination. Around midnight, I stepped outside to get some air. The sky was clear by then, full of stars, more than I'd ever seen before. I remember how quiet it was. Even the crickets had gone silent. It made me uneasy, like nature itself was waiting for something. Then I saw it. At first, I thought it was a shooting star, just a single streak of light cutting across the sky. But it stopped, just froze there, suspended over the tree line. Then another light appeared beside it, and another. 3 in total, arranged in a perfect triangle. They didn't blink. They didn't drift. They just hovered. I felt a pressure in my ears, the kind you get on an airplane. Except there was no wind, no sound, just that deep, heavy stillness. I squinted, trying to figure out what I was seeing. Maybe drones? Except they were too high, too big, and too silent. I went back inside and turned off all the lights. Through the window, I could still see the triangle in the sky. It hadn't moved, but it was lower now, larger, almost like it was descending. My pulse quickened, and I realized I was holding my breath. Then something strange happened. Every electronic device in the house flickered. The TV turned on by itself, showing static. My phone, which was charging on the counter, lit up and started vibrating nonstop. I tried to pick it up, but the screen was frozen. Just a bright white glow that didn't respond to touch. Outside, the lights began to shift colors, from white to amber, then a soft blue that bled into the night like fog. I remember that color vividly, because it wasn't like anything I'd seen before. It wasn't bright, but it illuminated everything around it. The trees, the field, even the roof of my house, as if daylight was leaking through from somewhere else. And then the humming started. It wasn't loud, but it was deep, low enough that I could feel it in my chest, vibrating through my ribs. The windows trembled slightly in their frames. My breathing grew, shallow, and I could feel my heartbeat picking up, faster and faster until it drowned out the hum completely. The lights began to move again, gliding silently across the field behind my house. I could see the grass bending beneath them, pressed down in circular shapes. My first thought was to grab my car keys, to leave. But when I looked for them, they weren't on the table where I'd left them. I searched frantically, trying to convince myself I was just panicking. But then something outside caught my attention. There was a shape in the field. Not one of the lights, something beneath them. It was tall, too tall to be a person, and its outline seemed to shimmer, like it wasn't fully there. I could see right through parts of it, the stars visible behind its form. But it was moving, slowly, toward the house. I stepped back from the window, barely breathing, afraid that if I made a sound, it would notice me. My hands were shaking so badly that I could hear the faint rattle of my wedding ring against the glass. And then everything stopped. The lights froze. The humming ceased. Even the air seemed to pause. For one long second, nothing moved. Then the lights went out. All of them. I was left standing in total darkness, unable to tell if my eyes were open or closed. That's when I heard something shift inside the house. At first, I thought it was the wind, maybe the old wooden frame settling after the power fluctuations. But there was no wind. The air was still and heavy, pressing down on everything like a weight. I stayed perfectly still, trying to listen past the pounding in my chest. There was a faint creak from the hallway, the sound of floorboards bending under pressure. Someone or something was inside. I wanted to call out, to say something, just to break the silence, but my voice wouldn't come. My throat felt locked, dry. I backed away slowly, moving toward the kitchen where I kept a flashlight. The power had gone out again, and the darkness was thick, almost tangible, like a fog pressing against my skin. When I found the flashlight, my hand was trembling so much I nearly dropped it. I clicked it on, and the beam sliced through the dark. Nothing. Just the narrow kitchen, the counter, the sink. Everything exactly where it should be. But the sound came again, this time closer. I turned the light toward the hallway. The beam caught something faint on the wall near the floor, a wet streak, thin and glistening, leading from the front door toward the living room. I followed it with my eyes, but when the flashlight flickered, just for a second, the streak was gone, like it had never been there. I forced myself forward step by step, keeping the light steady. The house felt wrong, like it had changed while I wasn't looking. The air smelled different, metallic, like rain on rust. My ears rang faintly, the same low hum from before, except softer now, almost hidden under my breathing. Then I saw the shadow. It was tall, stretching across the far wall of the living room. But there was nothing between the light and the wall that could have made it. I swung the flashlight around, searching every corner, but the beam hit nothing. The shadow didn't move like a reflection. It seemed to shift independently, like it was watching me. The hum grew stronger. The walls seemed to vibrate. I backed away until I hit the edge of the couch. My heart was beating so fast I could feel it pulsing in my neck. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but there was nowhere to go. Outside, those lights were still out there, somewhere in the darkness. Then all at once the flashlight died. I was plunged into darkness again. For a moment, I couldn't tell if my eyes were open. The air buzzed with that low hum, steady and deep. And then I realized something. My breathing wasn't the only sound. There was another, faint and rhythmic, just behind me. I froze. The temperature dropped so suddenly I could see my breath. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Every muscle in my body refused to move, but I could feel it. The presence. Something standing too close, close enough that I could sense its outline without seeing it. A flicker of light suddenly came from the window. A single orb hovered outside, glowing pale blue, drifting slowly across the glass. As it moved, the shadow on the wall shifted too, stretching, bending, as though reacting to it. I stepped backward, desperate to put distance between myself and that thing, and my shoulder brushed against something solid. For a split second, I felt warmth, human warmth, like the skin of a hand resting lightly against my arm. I turned. There was nothing there. The hum cut out. The light outside vanished. Total silence again. My phone screen lit up on the counter, startling me. It was glowing white, just like before. I picked it up and saw a new notification. A video file had been saved automatically. No title, no timestamp. Just static on the thumbnail. I didn't remember recording anything. When I pressed play, my stomach turned cold. The footage showed my living room. The exact moment I'd been standing there seconds ago. Except in the video, there was something behind me. A shape, faint but clear. Tall. Slender. And as I watched, it leaned closer to where I was standing in the frame. I dropped the phone. It hit the floor and the screen went dark, but for a moment I could still see that image burned into my mind. Its shape, right behind me, close enough that I should have felt its breath if it had any. I didn't move. I couldn't. The house was silent again, but that silence felt alive, like something was waiting for me to react. My eyes adjusted slowly, and I could make out the faint outlines of furniture in the dim gray from outside. Everything looked normal, and yet every part of me knew it wasn't. The air felt charged, as if static was crawling across my skin. My heartbeat had slowed, not from calm, but from exhaustion. My whole body was shaking, and I forced myself to pick up the phone, but the screen wouldn't turn on anymore. It was completely dead. I don't remember making the decision to leave. My body just did it on its own. I grabbed my keys, found them lying on the floor by the door even though I'd searched that spot earlier, and ran to the car. The night outside was too quiet, unnaturally so. Even the usual sounds of insects or rustling leaves were gone. When I started the car, the headlights came on weakly, flickering like the battery was dying. I looked out across the open field one last time before backing out. That's when I saw the lights again. Not 3 this time. Dozens. Maybe more. They were spread out across the horizon, floating in perfect symmetry, each one pulsing faintly, like it was breathing. For a moment, I couldn't look away. It was beautiful and horrifying at the same time. This vast, silent pattern stretching across the sky like a constellation that shouldn't exist. Then I blinked, and they shifted. All of them moved at once, rearranging into a single, vertical line that reached straight up into the clouds. The car's radio turned itself on again, hissing softly with static. Through the noise, I thought I heard something faint, like distant voices layered over each other, speaking too fast to understand. I slammed my foot on the gas. The car lurched forward, tires spitting gravel. I didn't look back. I just drove until the lights disappeared from the mirrors and the static faded from the speakers. When I finally reached town, it was almost sunrise. I parked in front of a diner and just sat there, shaking, trying to make sense of what had happened. My phone still wouldn't turn on. My clothes smelled faintly of ozone and metal. Eventually, I went home when it was daylight. The house was exactly as I'd left it, except for one thing. In the center of the living room floor, there was a small circle, burned into the wood, perfectly smooth around the edges, as if the material had melted instead of charred. I touched it, and the surface was cold. That same night, I tried to sleep, but kept waking up. Each time I did, I felt disoriented, like I'd been somewhere else for a moment, but couldn't remember where. Around 3 a.m., my phone suddenly powered on by itself. The screen stayed blank for several seconds, before a single message appeared. "We finished." No number, no sender, just that. I deleted it, turned the phone off, and left it on the table. I didn't sleep after that. A week later, I moved out. I told myself it was just fear, that maybe there was some explanation. Electrical interference, hallucination, anything that made sense. But sometimes, when I drive at night, I catch a glimpse of lights in the distance, perfectly aligned, perfectly still. And when I do, I feel that same vibration deep in my chest, like something remembering me.